Well, good morning. We are now well into the Advent season, and I hope your preparations are going well. And perhaps this year, for obvious reasons, our plans may not have gone quite as we would have liked. And this indeed has been the case within the church, with much of the church's year plan gone to the wind. But within all of this, there are some wise words in Proverbs. Proverbs 16:9 says, "The heart of man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps." And within this Advent season, these words ring hard and true if we look at the life of Joseph, Jesus' earthly father. As we read through chapters 1 and 2 of Matthew, the truth of this proverb is about to impact his life greatly. For the proverb is just another way of saying that when your plans are detoured or redirected, you find out who's really charting the course. You see, after what was an unplanned 2-year sojourn into Egypt, for Joseph it must have felt really good to be returning home to Nazareth. At last he was home. And nothing seemed to have changed. The same old marketplace, buildings and merchants. Those lifetime neighbours with their familiar gripes. And yes, the same old synagogue was still there with that same old rabbi. Oddly though, the normalcy felt a bit strange after the unexpected adventures over these past 2 years. And what an odyssey this simple Galilean carpenter had been on. It had all started with Mary's world-shaking pregnancy announcement. An announcement that took an angel to help him believe Mary's story. And then he had hardly stopped reeling from that news when he was hit with the decreed census from Rome. And Joseph recalled the anger he felt that some vain emperor a world away was ordering people to go to their ancestral cities to register. As a descendant of King David, this meant for Joseph a 100-mile walk to Bethlehem. It just seemed so, outrageously unjust. Not only would this disrupt his business, but there would be the travel expenses, money that he could ill afford. But worst of all, Mary would be in advanced pregnancy. And he remembered venting his exasperations to his friend, many of them who held to the view, if only the Messiah would come and deliver us from these Roman tyrants. He even remembered that one of them jesting with him, knowing that Joseph would have to go to Bethlehem, that perhaps he might find the Messiah there, this being a reference to Micah's prophecy. But you, O Bethlehem Ephrathah, who are too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who is to be ruler in Israel, whose coming forth is from of old, from ancient days. Micah 5 verse 2. Well, in that moment you might as well have hit Joseph over the head with a plank, for all at once Joseph saw it. The Emperor Augustus, for all his imperial pomp, was merely a tool in the hand of God to fulfill Scripture. And Joseph felt his anger melt away in awe-inspired joy. For yes, indeed, he, Joseph, most certainly would be seeing the Messiah in Bethlehem. In fact, after Jesus' incredible birth, Joseph had fully expected to make Bethlehem their new permanent home, for surely that's what Micah had meant. And in the weeks after his birth, he had really just started to get his business going in Bethlehem. But then there was that strange visit from these Persian astronomers bearing gifts. And then the angel came again in another dream, saying, "Rise up and flee to Egypt and remain there until I tell you, for Herod wants to murder the child." Joseph had felt anger rise against Herod, but he also felt a stab of fear. The Egyptian border was another 100-mile foot journey for he, his wife and child, mostly through desert. But he quickly remembered if Augustus was God's tool, so must also be Herod. God had his reasons for sending his son to Egypt. And so Joseph, under the cover of darkness, fled to that country. And what of Egypt? This was one place that Joseph had never expected to see, much less live there. He hadn't any idea how he would feed or house his family, but he need not have worried. God provided wonderfully for them. And then after a month or so, another dream, another commission. Herod had died, and he was to take the child back to Israel. And Joseph assumed this meant returning to Bethlehem. But he soon learned that Herod's son Archelaus was now ruling over Judea as his father had died. And Archelaus was just as cruel as his father. If he had got wind of a Messiah in Bethlehem, no doubt another assassination attempt would be made. And then there was one more angelic dream, and so it was back to Nazareth. These past few years had been far from tranquil for this young family. They were filled with grueling travel during the hardest part of a pregnancy, a birth in a barn, no steady income, an assassination attempt, 2 desert crossings on foot with an infant, living in a foreign country, waiting on God's guidance and provisions, usually just in the nick of time. It was difficult, expensive, time-consuming, career-delaying, and full of uncertainty. And you know, it was all God's will. For us too, life can be full of unplanned and bewildering detours, usually not making sense in the moment. But what was true in Joseph's day remains true for us. God's ways are not our ways, because our lives are all about Him, not about us. He is orchestrating far more than we will ever know in every unexpected event and delay. And when you find yourself slowly moving in a direction you had not planned, well, take heart, hold tight, and trust in God's navigation. And we finish there for this morning. God bless for now. Goodbye.